Hey, welcome everybody to Life and Leadership Podcast. We're so excited that you're part of our leadership community. My name's David Gadberry, and I'm so excited that you are interested in leadership. You know what Life and Leadership Podcast is all about is sometimes when we talk about leadership, we talk about it in a context that seems very sterile. We package 7 habits of this, or 6 steps to that, or 12 ways to do this. And it seems like, hey, if I just take these steps and I go use this, I'm going to be successful. But we all know that it doesn't work that way, that there's real life involved and real people involved. And so just to take the principles without some kind of context doesn't really work. So that's what we want Life and Leadership to be about. So we're going to answer questions every week. We're going to have guests, coaches, leaders, business owners, entrepreneurs, that we'll be interviewing at different times that you're going to love and are going to help you see the goods, the bads, the ups, the downs, every part of how leadership works and applies to real life. And so that's what Life and Leadership is all about. Hey, so thank you for being a part. And here's what I'd like for you to do. If you're new with us, please subscribe. And we release these every Thursday. And so if you subscribe, it'll come right to you and let you know when a new one has been released. And then rate us. If this adds value to your life, go give a review and rate it. And this just helps our audience grow. And it helps, the algorithms that are social media will expand as we're rated and reviewed and talked about in that way. And that's our goal, is to add value to as many people as we possibly can. So we would ask you to help us do that. If you could do me that favor, that would be fantastic. And so make sure you do that. And also, if this adds value to you, maybe it would add value to a friend or a neighbor or a family member or an entrepreneur or whatever the case may be. We would love for them to experience it as well. So thanks so much for being a part today. So the series we're in right now we're talking about healthy leadership. Healthy leadership is very important. And remember that just because something looks successful doesn't mean it's healthy. How many times have we seen this in the stock market? How many times have we seen this with big banks? How many times have we seen this with pastors? How many times have we seen this with different organizational leaders, educators, religious leaders, that they looked on the outward like, hey man, they are killing it. This is totally successful. But come to find out, it was broken down on the inside. And it's because we don't talk enough, think about, process enough, or deal enough with what it means to be healthy as a leader. And to be honest, I realize that to be a success and to be significant in leadership, you're going to have some times that you have to sacrifice and you have to give more, and you're going to have to give extra time, and you're going to have to deal with issues. You're going to have to, whatever the case may be, but you can be healthy and do that. And so I want to encourage you to be healthy. So that's what we're talking about. And what we talked about last week was that healthy leaders are dreamers, because dreamers are people that are hope-filled. And so healthy leaders are filled with hope. They're not cynical. They're not critical. They're not sarcastic, but they're people who are filled with hope, that are absolutely want to lead other people to a better life. And that's healthy. That's healthy leadership. So the second thing I want to talk to you about is healthy leaders are secure leaders. So the idea here is I want to talk about the dangers of insecurity in leadership. And I want to talk about how to overcome comparison, competition, and corruption in leadership. Comparison, competition, and corruption in leadership. Insecurity is a killer. It just doesn't belong in a leader's life. However, leadership sometimes draws people who are wrought with insecurity, filled with insecurity. Sometimes people who are charismatic, people who have a gregarious personality, people who have those traits that we identify with so much of the time. Some are right, some are not. But those traits are sometimes the same personality deals with a lot of insecurity, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, because what we do is deal with people. What we do is lead others. What we do matters not only to us, but to others. And so it kind of creates this dynamic. So that's why I want to talk about it, because healthy leaders are secure leaders. They're not insecure. They don't allow comparison or competition or corruption to overrun them, but they keep that ugly animal, that monster of insecurity at bay in their life, and they walk in confidence and security and integrity and wholeness, and they don't allow themselves to be torn apart. I'll tell you a story. When I was young, I was probably 28, 29. And I'm a pastor and a leader, and so I come from a place of faith. And so if you're not a person like that, I'm not going to push my faith on you. I'll share it with you if you ask questions, but I'm not going to be someone I'm not either. So if you're a person coming from a secular place, that's okay. These principles will work for you as well. These conversations will work for you as well. So don't shy away from us because of that. Understand that we really believe and we really are coming from that place, and it's okay. So a few years ago, there's a man by the name of Tommy Barnett. Now, this guy, if you're in our circles, he's the best of the best. He's just, man, he is a significant person. I love him. Every time I can hear him speak, every time I can be around him, I just want to be around him. He's since retired. He still does ministry. He's got sons in ministry that are leading the churches that he's established and the ministry works that he's established. And I mean, he's had such an impact on the church world. It just makes it that much more embarrassing as I tell you this story. Oh God, it just embarrasses me when I think about it. I was telling it to our staff the other day, and it was just hard to tell and hard to hear, and it was funny, and it is funny. But I was probably 28, 29 years of age, and he came to our church in Oklahoma City. My pastor, Kirk Pankratz, had invited him to a conference we were doing at Church of the Harvest. And so he came, he's one of the speakers, and I was young, and one of my roles at the time was to be helpful to the speakers that came. So if Pastor Kirk hadn't made it into the office yet, I would go in and I would connect and kind of host them. So Pastor Kirk called me and said, "Hey, can you go host Tommy? He'll be here, and if you can just kind of make him comfortable, help him find what he needs, help him to get prepared for a night." So I go in, and I don't know what happened to me. I was young. He was such a big deal. This guy had a mega church when mega church wasn't even a thing. I mean, he was influencing that many people, and not only people in a local church, but so many pastors would go to his pastor's conference, and thousands upon thousands of people around the world would be influenced by him. And so I was intimidated. And this is not a guy you would be intimidated by. Such a lovely guy. I mean, he's just one of the best. I mean, just his heart and his vision and his hope. And I just get inspired every time I'm around him. But here I am, and I'm going in, and I'm like 28, 29, and I am in awe of this guy. And I'm telling you, I get in there, and what my job is just to be helpful. I'm just there to help him and to serve him and to do whatever he needs. And something came over me, and it was insecurity. I needed him to know how important I was all of a sudden. And so he asked me one simple question, and I just threw up on him. I was just like, here's what I do at the church, and here's what I'm responsible for, and here's what I do, and I'm responsible for this. And I just gushing all the things about me. And there's something, and listen, young leaders, if you're watching this, if you're in business, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're in ministry, whatever the case may be, look, there's something about us when we're young, because we're afraid people won't hear us. We're afraid that people won't believe that we have something to offer. Sometimes we overcompensate. Insecurity drives us. We don't feel emotionally secure. We don't feel confident because we're afraid we're not going to be heard or seen or known. And so we overdo it. And that's exactly what I was doing. Oh, God. And it put him off. Now, Tommy Barnett, I don't know him today. He probably wouldn't know me. He's met so many people, and he's seen so many people. He's had so many conversations, but we're not friends. But he was put off by that at that point. I was 28, 29 years old, and he just stopped talking to me. And he was giving me the cold shoulder. It was very clear that's what he was doing. And it wasn't because he was bad or he was a bad guy. It was just simply because I had become this ridiculous version of myself. And so I finally, I said, hey, I'm going to leave you to it. If there's anything you need, please let me know. I'll be right in here. But I could feel that it was making him uncomfortable. So I left. And you know what I did? I let that insecurity continue to rail on me. Now, look, that's what this podcast is about, real life. It's not about just seeing leadership principles and saying, apply this to your life and it's going to work out great. It's about, hey, let's talk about real stuff. I was immature. I was insecure. And I made an idiot out of myself. But when I left that room, you know what I didn't do? I didn't blame me. I blamed him. And for several years after that, I thought, he's not what everybody thinks he is. He's rude. He's cold. He doesn't really care about people. This is what I allowed myself to believe. I got offended at one of my heroes. And a few years later, it was several years later, I was at Church of the Harvest for 15 years, but a few years later, we had Tommy back for something. And this time, when I got around him, I was like, I had come to the place in my maturity where I realized I was such an idiot, and I've got to make a decision to do better and stop being so insecure. And at this point, I had grown in my life so much that I was very confident. I had dealt with the insecurities in my life. I'd ceased to let, comparison and competition and corruption get in me, and I had grown out of that. So this time when he came, I thought, I'm getting around him and I am going to listen. So what I did is I started studying this guy. I started reading his books and asking questions about his ministry and reading everything I could get my hands on, and listening to people who were close to him and just finding out. So when he showed up this time, man, I was ready. I started asking questions and, what about this? And I saw that you did this. And man, what was that like? And just asking him questions and drawing out of him things that I could learn. Here's something interesting to me. Insecurity will do things to you. Always remember this. Insecurity and pride are partners, and they work hand in hand to destroy your life. Listen to me. They will destroy you. And when your insecurity meets your pride and they get together against you, you're in trouble. And here's an example of that. How often do we really not know how to do something or have clarity on something, but because we're so prideful and we don't want somebody to know we don't know, we'll act like we know. Now, think about that. Your pride is convincing you, and your insecurity is convincing you to act like you know something you don't know. So you're not going to learn it, you're not going to grow, and you're going to get it wrong, and ultimately this is going to end bad, and your pride is going to be crushed, and you're going to be humiliated because you just wouldn't admit, I don't know. Well, that's what insecurity and pride does to you. So if you're a good leader and you learn and you mature, then I have this opportunity to meet him again. I'm asking questions. I want to know what I don't know. I want to hear from him. Why does he need to hear from me? Let me teach you something, leaders, too. When you get around people who are important and people who really have lived their lives to make a difference, they're going to be far more impressed about you trying to learn from them than they are about you trying to show them how impressive you are. Let's stop trying to make an impression and be more the type of person that makes a difference. Nobody really cares how great you think you are. Everybody's just trying to be great. Everybody's just trying to succeed at something. And it's not important. Appearances, here's what I know more and more. The older I get, appearances really don't matter. What is actual is what matters. And so insecurity drives you there. So for the rest of that conference, every time we'd come into a room, he would call me. Now, remember, we're not friends now, and I don't know him. I wish I had kept up a relationship with him. I don't know him right now. But I'm telling you, every time I'd come into a room, he said, hey, David, come and sit with me. And we'd sit and talk and eat together. I mean, literally the whole conference, every time I walked in the room, he would call me over. And we would talk and we would share. It was the whole, I don't know what happened in the rest of that conference. I honestly don't remember anybody else that was there. I don't remember any other speaker. I don't remember any other situation. I just remember those moments of time where he invested because of this guy had done something to change the world. Man, as you see me getting emotional right now, it meant something. I missed that the first time. How many times have you missed? How many opportunities have you missed because of insecurity, because of a desire to impress somebody, because of wanting people to think you're important or that you matter. You know what? People who are of substance already know you matter. And they're interested in helping you. And they don't need you to try to put yourself on their radar. You and I just need to get over insecurity and be the confident leader that we can be. So, how do we deal with it? How do we handle comparison? How do we overcome comparison? How do we overcome unhealthy competition? And how do we overcome corruption in leadership? I'm going to try to do this very quickly because I don't want the podcast to go too long. But every one of us have insecurity in some area of our life. Every single one of us. And there's a cycle that is at work in our life. And a lot of psychologists will call it self-fulfilling prophecy. Here's how I see it working. A lot of us have thoughts of ourselves. We view ourselves a certain way. The way we view ourselves then begins to affect the way we talk about ourselves and the way we behave. Those behaviors then evoke from others certain behaviors, certain responses, and then those responses reinforce what we believed about ourselves. Let me give you 2 examples. One, if you're a person who's very introverted and you in your heart of hearts, because you've had some bad experiences or negative experience, maybe because of that introversion, you think people don't like you. So that's kind of a buried thought, a limiting thought in the back of your mind. People don't really like me. I don't really get along well with people. I'm better in the background, which may be true. All those things may be true. But you start allowing that to affect your psyche, your esteem, the way you feel about yourself, your confidence. And so when you go into a public arena, you behave in a way that reflects that thought about yourself. So you become a wallflower, you stand on the wall, and you subconsciously have this message typed across your forehead that says, "Don't approach me." And you may not even realize that you do, but your behavior is expressing or manifesting your thoughts. And then that behavior gets a response from people. What's the response? I'm not approaching, because they don't want to be approached. It's obvious the way their body language is and their posture. They don't want to be approached. And so they don't approach. And then what does that response do to you? It creates a reinforcement in you about that thought you had. See, people don't really like me. I went out. No one even talked to me. No one even approached me. No one even cares to talk to me. I'm not important. You see how that works? And it becomes a vicious cycle in our life. It's the way our mind works. That's why if we want our life to change or we want to become unstuck, we have to identify what those limiting thoughts are and change them, so that because our life will follow the way our mind is set. And that's just the way life works. So let's take, for example, another guy, a guy who thinks himself the life of the party. Okay, this guy, he thinks everybody loves him. Everybody loves him. Everybody gets along with him. Everybody loves it when he comes around. Everybody loves when he's talking. Everything. And he might be the most annoying guy in the world. Everybody might hate to see him coming, but watch what happens. I'm the life of the party. The party can start when I show up. I'm the guy. This guy comes into a public arena. What does he do? He's shaking hands with people. He's approaching people. He's walking up. Hey, how's it going? And when someone acts that way to you, what do? You respond in kind. Hey, I'm doing great. How are you doing? And that guy leaves with the reinforcement from your response of what? See, I told you, everybody loves me. Now, those 2 things may not be true, and they may be 100% based on perception, but a lot of life is. And if we think a certain way, that affects our behaviors, which evokes a response, and that response reinforces a thought that we have. So we need to make sure that we understand if we have insecurities, and those insecurities are filling our mind, and our mind is becoming invaded with limiting thoughts based on insecurities, which is nothing more than emotional fear. Fear of being rejected, fear of not being approved of, fear of being compared to, fear of not living up to the standard, fear of a lack of excellence, fear that I'm not going to succeed, fear of failure, all of these fears that build up in our minds and build up in our hearts and build up in our lives. And then the way our mind is set, our life will follow. So we have to break some of those mindsets. We have to, if we're going to be secure and confident. And remember, healthy leaders are secure leaders. Unhealthy leaders are insecure leaders. And can I just say, insecurity breeds insecurity. And if you're wondering if the culture of your organization is a lot of insecurity and a lot of backbiting, a lot of talking out of turn, a lot of gossiping, a lot of comparing, you might want to ask a question. Am I bringing that to the culture? Do I feel that way about myself? So how do we do it? Well, life is cycles, just like the cycle we talked about just now. And we can either let the cycle of fear continue in our life, or we can determine we're going to live by a different cycle. It's what I call the cycle of security. I think that if you operate under the cycle of security or the circle of security, it chases insecurity out of your life. Now, this comes heavily from my belief in God, my belief in relationship with Jesus Christ. So I just want you to understand that's where I'm coming from. So the first part of this cycle is to relate to God properly. Okay? A lot of people are insecure because they don't know how to relate to God. They don't know what to do with God. And because we're so connected to God, and He's created us, if we view Him improperly, it creates fear in our life, insecurity. I don't know where I stand. And really, a relationship with God should produce security and confidence in our life. So first I have to learn how to relate to God. Well, how does God want, and I'm going quickly through this. I could take literally a podcast on each one of these, but I'm not going to. How do I relate to God? Well, let's relate to God in the way that He asked us to relate to Him. Jesus, when He was teaching the disciples how to pray, He said, when you pray, say, Our Father. So even though God is our creator, He's the God of the universe, He's the King of all kings, He's the Lord of our lords, He's the beginning, the end, all of these things we know about God and we express about God, and He is God, and we should reverence Him and we should respect Him. But the way He wants us to relate to Him is as Father. He's Daddy. Romans chapter 8:15 says, Paul wrote this, he said, we have not been given the spirit of bondage again to fear, which what is insecurity? Emotional fear. But we've been given the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father, or Daddy, Father, or Papa, God. That it's a real intimate term for Dad. In other words, He wants us to relate to Him as Daddy. So if you're relating to God as some mean ogre who's just waiting for you to mess up, who just hates your guts, and He created you, but He doesn't really like you, and He's just tolerating your existence. If you relate to Him that way, and you don't see Him as the loving Father who wants you to be a part of His family and who wants you to do well and who wants to bless your life and He's not some jokester in heaven messing with your life. If you see Him as Father, as Daddy, then it changes your whole perspective. It gives you confidence. If God, the creator of the universe, God, the King of all kings, is my dad, and I have access to Him, and He wants me to relate to Him as He's my dad and I'm His child, what in the world, emotional or otherwise, do I have to be afraid of? Well, bad things happen. Yeah, but if God's my dad, I can go to Him and talk to Him. The second thing is, how do you relate to yourself? So first you got to relate to God properly. And I believe if you do relate to God properly, He'll help you relate to yourself properly. Well, how do I relate to myself? Well, most people don't relate to themselves honestly. They really don't. They either get into the depths of a victim's mentality and the world's against me, and the reason my life is bad like this is because, no one loves me and I've had a bad upbringing or whatever. And then you have some people that pretend. They are that hypocrite type person. They live behind a mask. They aren't really who you think they are. And they're pretending and they're putting on. All of us have the propensity for either one of these. Really, it's the truth. And most of us have not learned how to really truly be honest with ourselves. In order for us to be able to do that, be honest with ourselves, we're going to have to really truly take a look. We're going to have to really, truly say, who am I really? Before you can start seeing yourself through the eyes of potential, seeing yourself through the eyes of the way God sees you, the eyes that say, hey, this is who you really are. This is who you could be. You could grow and mature into this person. Before you can see that, you have to admit, this is where I'm at. And you have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, hey, man, this is me in the flesh. I've got problems. I'm prideful, or I'm arrogant, or man, I don't have a lot of integrity, or I've got some character issues, or whatever the case may be, whatever the issue is, you first have to get honest with yourself. Here's why. Think about building a house. If you want to build a house, you have to build a firm foundation first. That foundation's got to be solid, it's got to be level, and it's got to be real. If you go and start building framework onto ground that doesn't have a foundation, it's not going to take much of anything to knock your life over. So you can build all this framework, all this pretend life on top of this dirt if you want to. But what's going to ultimately happen when pressure comes and problems come and issues come, you're toppling, man. Your life is over. It's going down. You're going to have to build again. And so it would be better to just go back and build on a foundation that's true, that's solid, that's level. And that foundation is you saying to yourself, look, I know that I've got some things to work on, and this is who I really am. If you've got goals in life and you've got vision in life and you got a place you want to go, how can you get there if you don't know where you are? You can't truly create a trajectory to where you're going, or know how long it's going to take, or know how far the trip is, or know what it's going to take and what's in the way between you and there, if you don't admit, this is where I am. This is why I can't stand it in business or ministry or any other place when people exaggerate. Because if you exaggerate about where you are, you can never really rejoice when you get to a certain place, because you're not giving yourself the opportunity to have points of demarcation, because you've been lying about it, right? So let's just be honest. I've got to first relate to myself for who I am. Then when I get clear about that and really say, all right, this is where I'm at, then I can start saying, but I don't have to stay here. And this is not someone else's fault. Even if people have been ugly to me, I can move on. So begin to see myself through the eyes of potential. James talked about it. I'm not going to go into it theologically, but you can read it in the book of James when he talks about looking into the perfect law of liberty. In other words, when you look into the Word of God, you should see a reflection coming back to you. And every time you look back, you should be looking more and more like Jesus. You should be looking more and more like the person He's created you to be. And then the third thing is, okay, so you're becoming more secure because you're relating to God as Father. You're relating to yourself in a more real way. So now I don't have to be afraid of anything else. God's my dad. If I have a relationship with Him, let me be clear about that. Then if I'm relating appropriately to myself, then what? Well, I don't have to be afraid of people approval. I don't have to be afraid of what do people think. I can be very confident in, all right, I know where I'm at, and this is where it is, and I know where I'm going, and everybody else may not know where I'm going, but I know where I'm going, and I'm going to be concerned with where I'm at and where I'm going, and I'm not going to let anybody else pressure me about that. And so you're more secure, you're more confident. Why? Because you've dealt with it, right? You're not lying about it anymore. You're not pretending. Man, pretension's a killer, and it's married to insecurity, so you don't want to be around it. Thirdly, how do I relate to others? This is where it really gets real, because we don't relate to others well. I really believe that everybody's put in your life for everybody can be used that's in your life. I'll say it that way. I'm not saying God sends everybody that comes to your life. I don't believe that. But what I do believe is I believe that every person that comes to your life can be used to benefit your life. Even the people who've hurt me, yes, because you can learn something out of the hurt. You can learn something out of pain. Matter of fact, why are you wasting pain? If you're going to have some pain in your life, use it to teach you. Learn from it. Don't let it beat you. Learn from it. And if you go through pain and don't learn from it, you let it beat you. You wasted the opportunity. So even people who've hurt you can be a benefit to you. We look at people mostly in two ways, comparison and competition. Those are both inappropriate ways to look at people. We are to benefit them, they're to benefit us. And if we relate to people properly, knowing, here's how you do that. I've got gifts, I've got personality, I've got skill sets, I've got purpose. I need to learn to appreciate what mine is. And when I see myself appropriately, I learn who I am, I develop that relationship with myself, who I am, what my giftings are, what I can contribute, and I get real confident in that. Then I see what others can contribute and what their giftings are and what their skill set are. And I learn to appreciate that. And then I learn that if I work together with others, I'm not just independent, but I'm also interdependent. And I learn to work well with those people who could complement me and whom I could complement. These are people who I can work together to achieve something and accomplish something great. But if I'm constantly caught up in fearing what people think and fearing if I'm going to be noticed and fearing if I'm going to stand above the crowd, then what happens is I constantly compare and I constantly compete. And it makes my life miserable, and it causes insecurity to rise to the top because we start assuming a lot of things, and we start making a lot of things up, and we start creating drama for ourselves that doesn't even exist. Come on, you all know what I'm talking about. You've all experienced it. I've experienced it. So you have to learn to relate to God appropriately, to relate to yourself appropriately, and to relate to others appropriately. And listen, when we compare, we always do it this way. We compare our weaknesses to their strengths, our strengths to their weaknesses. When you compare your weaknesses to someone else's strengths, that's insecurity. When you compare your strengths to someone else's weakness, that's pride. Neither one of those things are positive for you. Okay? So then the last thing is, how do I relate to my purpose, my vision, my destiny in life? Well, if you are secure in who God is, if you're secure in who you are, and if you're secure in how you can work with others, then you can be secure in your destiny and your purpose. And here's the whole point. The whole point is this. A lot of times people look at life and they don't even try to pursue purpose. They don't even try to pursue destiny or vision in their life because they're just trying to make it. I'm just trying to survive. I get up, I go to work. There's really not a whole lot of meaning. I find all my meaning in just going to work, coming home, doing all the activities that my kids do, going to bed at night, getting up, doing that over again 365 days a year with a couple of weeks vacation. If I can get that in, then but can I tell you something? When you get to the end of your life, that is not going to be enough. Now, I'm not saying that we should fill our life with a bunch of things. I'm saying when you get to the end of your life, all the things you did need to mean something. And if you think that's not true, go read some research studies that have been done by people in hospices that have talked to people about regrets. And you'll find very quickly there's a lot of regrets. It has to mean something. It should mean something. And if you learn how to sweep insecurity out of your life by relating to God, yourself, others, and your destiny, your future, your purpose well, then you'll be confident and insecurity will be chased out and you'll be a very secure leader. That's a healthy leader. So you could either respond that way of, I don't need that, or there's other people that respond, I'm afraid of that. I'm afraid to take the risk. I'm afraid to step out. I'm afraid. There's no reason to be afraid. We learn from our failures. Failure is not final. It's not fatal. It's future education. I love this quote from Henry Ford. He said, failure is merely an opportunity to do it again more intelligently. That's where we need to be. That's what we need to do. So here's how it works. When you get secure about all those relationships, they work as a cycle. And the more you understand that relationship with God, the better you understand yourself, the more able you are to coordinate, communicate, cooperate with others, which leads to security in your purpose, which makes you understand God's desire for you in life. And you become more and more confident, more and more secure, and less insecure and emotionally afraid. So if I could just encourage you today, please, 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 chase insecurity out of your life and understand that a healthy leader is a secure leader. Now, I have one question that we're going to deal with today. We've got several, but we're going to look at this one. It says, how do I deal with a boss who doesn't understand leadership? That's a perfect question for today because the first thing you don't want to do is be insecure. There are a lot of bosses. This is not abnormal to get a question like this. How do I deal with a boss who doesn't understand leadership? This is not uncommon because it's not been until modern times, like when I say modern times, I'm talking about the last 20 years, that leadership has become such an influence. There's always been leadership, don't misunderstand me, but the teaching on it, the training on it. And most people, this is why I do leadership coaching, because most people, they're very good at what they do, but a lot of the problems they have in their organizations, teams, businesses, companies, whatever, are leadership issues. They're not issues with their expertise. So you have doctors' offices or whatever. They're having leadership issues with their team working together, or with people moving in the direction they want the business to go. So becoming a better doctor isn't going to change that. But learning how to lead, or having someone come in and create a system of leadership in your organization, can do that. Same thing with educators. It's so funny to me to watch educators, administrators, and school boards and things of that nature, that they think, well, we just get in, we'll teach them how to be better teachers, and we'll teach them how to be better at this issue. And they just, more education. It's not an education issue. It's a leadership issue. And what we need is to have leadership coaches and leaders come in and say, hey, here is what will help. And so that's why I do what I do, and that's what makes it important. So this is not uncommon to say my boss doesn't understand leadership. However, you need to be careful, if you're a person in this situation, to understand that if you really understand leadership, you don't take this tack. You don't take this approach. Don't be insecure about it. Don't make yourself a victim and them a villain. Create a scenario where you can be a 360-degree leader that John Maxwell talks about. But how do I do that? Well, what is leadership? Especially from our perspective, from my perspective, leadership is service, being a servant, serving someone else. So how do I serve someone else? I figure out how to add value to them. And when I figure out how to add value to someone, I do that, and that is serving them. And when you serve someone, you add value to them, that gives you influence with them. And then you're able to help a leadership culture to be born and to grow and to develop. And I don't know anybody who really studies leadership and goes into their organization that if they have a boss or someone around them that starts seeing the way they do things. We do a leadership track here at our church organization, and I have a guy that came in and he took those classes on leadership. He took those principles he learned back to his job and immediately started getting promotions, and has continued to get promotions since then. Why? Because a boss who wasn't necessarily really a great leader saw leadership, and now that organization's culture of leadership locally has changed and been affected and been impacted. So it's important that you understand it's not the end of anything, and it doesn't have to become a conflict, and it's not necessary for you to go confront or have the wrong attitude, and definitely don't go to other people and start talking about he doesn't understand leadership, and if they just knew leadership, blah, blah, blah. All you're showing there is you don't know leadership. So add value, serve, work with, be available, take opportunities, reach for responsibility. This is how you deal with a boss who you think doesn't understand leadership. And I guarantee you the outcomes will be positive. And if they're not, and they're an immature person and they never grow, ultimately you may have to go somewhere else because you'll outgrow the organization. But if you really want to be effective there, and you really want to deal with your boss, it's not about telling him off. It's not about telling other people how he's not good. It's not about you getting one up on him. It's not about getting him removed as the boss. It's about you adding value, serving, and allowing opportunities for influence to come to you so that you can create a culture of leadership in that dynamic. So that's what I would say about that. So thanks everybody today for joining us for our leadership community and for life and leadership. And I hope some of the things I've shared with you today have been helpful to you. And I really feel like they have. So if any questions you have, please feel free to send them in to Gadberry connect at gadberry.org. And then please subscribe. If you're new with us, please feel free to subscribe to the podcast and on YouTube and on iTunes, and it'll come right to you every week. And then share it with somebody. If you want to share it with them, it'd be great for you to add value to their life in that way, because that's really all we're trying to do. We're just trying to create value in people's lives because we want to help as many people as possible reach the potential that we know exists in them. So, hey, go out today, add value to somebody's life, because I guarantee you the greater value will be added back to you. God bless.